An Untraveled Road by Nyan Zangetsu, Chapter 10, The Enemy of My Enemy. This matters. Family matters. Touch my family and you die. The enemy of my enemy. Watts didn't consider himself a religious man, but here, now, he couldn't help but wonder if the gods were smiling upon him. Someone certainly was. Hours of contemplation, days spent in isolation, weeks wasted on work, months mangled by lack of inspiration, and then, quite suddenly, an epiphany, a stroke of luck. It drove him forward now, as it had for the last few days. Everything was coming together. Really, it was almost too good to be true. The cynic in him knew a crash was coming, for the life of him, he couldn't bring himself to care. One shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. After all, classic music spilled from a nearby radio as he hunched over his computer, humming softly to himself. An empty kettle of coffee lay forgotten beside his desk, drained to the last drop. He drank it all. His blood was pure caffeine by this point. Of course, he knew he must look he must look a right state. His hair unkempt, mustache a droopy mess, clothes dirty and rumpled. He'd not slept in. Well, he honestly didn't remember. It had been quite some time since his last power nap. He remembered eating something a few hours ago, so he didn't lack for nutrition. Sleep? Who needs sleep? Irrelevant. He could pass out once this was done. He was so close. He knew it. He could feel it. Just a bit more, and I'll rest. A hand flew across the keyboard at a feverish pace. Hastily inputting the last lines of code, it flashed green, and so too did triumph dance over his face. Aha! There! Thanks to his semblance, Arthur understood technology more than most. It spoke to him in ways few could understand. Anyone else would have been unable to decipher such data as quickly as he. And he saw through it all. Mind a world with possibilities. What happened when you blended aura with chakra? What happened when such a being gained life, sentience, a soul? Long had he pondered that question. Chakra wasn't like aura. They were two separate sources of power. Melding the two was nigh on impossible, just as you couldn't have a semblance without a soul, or couldn't sustain itself without the sense of self. But chakra was so very different. At least Naruto's was. It wanted to burn, to thrive, grow. Once given life, it would inevitably expire if left alone long enough. But he'd since found ways to remedy that. It wanted purpose, life. Watts was all too happy to grant it such. Chakra was merely the means to kickstart his latest experiment, and he was the only one that knew of it. The advancements he could make, the strides. Why, it was enough to make a man's head spin. Remnant would sing his praises for centuries after this. He would revolutionize Atlas. He would change the world. He would be legendary. Running his experiments by Naruto was a small price to pay for greatness, if only because he knew his ally would see the greatness in this. They were two men cut from the same cloth. Naruto's talents lay on the field of battle, and with his silver tongue, he could conquer even the coldest of hearts and turn them to his way of thinking. He was a protector, yes, but not a builder. He could not create. He wanted to help people, but possessed little in the way of ambition. Quite all right, that. Watts had enough ambition for the both of them. A faint chime caught Arthur's attention. He spun away from his computer and pressed the enter key as he did. From there, he kicked off his desk with his good leg, seated himself, and said chair wheeling across the room with a delighted cackle. His feet kicked down suddenly, dragging his chair to a halt. Aura flared. He ignored it, focused solely on the object before him. Nay, not an object. The pod before him held his life's his life's ambition, his magnus opus, his masterwork, contained within, suspended by an area of wires and pale blue fluid. She waited him. Pietro could have his plots and that precious penny project. This would blow his rival right out of the water. Can you hear me, my dear? Arthur leaned back, eyes alert as the being before slumbered began to move in her pod. Do you dream, I wonder? A soft, tiny voice came through the speaker. A beat of stilted silence followed, and Watts held his breath, hoped, dreamed. The young girl before him moved, rather, her hand did. Pale slated grey arms and and began to twitch, despite lacking the musculature needed to do so. She wasn't human after all, no matter how much she might resemble one. She blinked once, twice, thrice. Golden red eyes fluttered open and shut, then open again. She tilted her head, long dark hair moving in the liquid, falling across one side of her face as she regarded him, first with confusion, followed by recognition. His heart skipped a beat. Her hand moved, pressed against the glass. She wasn't complete, not yet, but she would be. He'd done it. By Jove, he'd done it. Artificial life, true sentience, powered by chakra and aura alike, self-sustaining with her own thoughts and will. He would be legendary for this, of course. So would his ally. None of this would be possible without him. He'd have to talk. He had to be told, of course, but not yet. There were still kinks to iron out. She was alive. She was awake. That was all that mattered. She recognized him. She remembered his voice. This was the first time she'd seen him with her eyes. A small, tremulous smile bloomed across her pale features as she gazed up at him. Father. Without a smile, the doctor leaned forward and laid his right hand upon the glass. Welcome to the world, my dear Alma. Must I wear this? Naruto did not smirk at Cinder, nor did he snicker at her as she pouted. He certainly didn't deride his daughter's discomfort as she sheathed and squirmed in her new dress. Nope, not a bit. He kept his emotions bottled up, his whiskered visage blanked as an empty canvas. Anyone who said or suggested otherwise was a liar and a traitor. I know you don't like it. He tousled her hair gently, careful not to muss it up too badly. Willow would kill him if he did, but just bear with it for now. It's only for tonight. In years to come, Cinder Schnee would be a beauty beyond beauties, but for now, she was just a child, and right now, this child looked fit to spit fire. Naruto flicked a quick glance to her palms just to make sure they weren't burning red. Given the nature of her semblance, that was a very real possibility. Cinder could be all elbow and knees when she wanted to be, and she certainly wasn't afraid to make her opinion known these days. And yet, he couldn't help but think her defiance oddly adorable, like a baby dragon or a baby shark. Did they still have that grim onesie Willow bought her? Don't let her catch you saying that. Kurma's raucous laughter echoed in the back of his head. She'll bite you. Cinder? Nah. Naruto did his best not to laugh as he looked down at her again. She'd asked for a red dress on a whim, and Nicholas obliged her request. Unfortunately, she underestimated the nature of this little gathering, much less what would be required of her. Formal was formal, after all, and tonight would be no exception. And if everyone had to suffer through this, so did she. By the log, did she look like it? Instead of the simple scarlet garment, as Cinder expected, the servants had crammed the poor girl into a long-sleeved red gown rimmed with white fur and matching stockings, a large silvery snowflake bearing many spokes, the Schnee crest, lay stitched into the back, a happy reminder of her new life. It contrasted nicely with her immaculately curled hair for the occasion, left to fall down her back in ebony ringlets, where that all she might not have been so surely with everyone, but they'd made her wear heels, actual heels, bright red things that looked far too ungainly for a child to wear. No wonder she wanted to stab something. At least he only had to wear a white suit and a red tie tonight. Cinder looked like she was 3 seconds from tearing her dress apart and storming upstairs. You don't have anything to worry about. He patted her head before she could, smiling in the face of her scowl. Nothing's bad gonna happen, and if it does, a golden eye peeked up at him through the dark curtains of her hair. Then I'll smack them in the mouth. He slammed a fist into an open palm. That thawed her worry, but only a little. A sudden pang of fatherly worry hit him in the chest, and he acted on it, kneeling down to draw Cinder in for a quick hug. The former urchin hissing in surprise at the sudden physical contact, but didn't fight him as she had in the past. She knew better by now. It still took her nearly 10 seconds to fully relax in his grasp. And then she clamped down hard. Her chin came down over his shoulder, and she held on for dear life. His hand came down on her back, stroking her shoulders. He still wasn't used to the idea of being a father, but damn it, he was determined to try. Tell you what, when in doubt, fall back on bribery. I think I know a neat little fire jutsu that you might be able to use with your semblance. I'll teach it to you tomorrow morning. Then we'll practice while walking. I know you can do that with your semblance. It worked like a charm too. Cinder's eyes lit up, unable to conceal the spark of excitement there. Promise? Promise, he hissed her forehead. Now go find your mother. We're going to be late. Bring your swords too. Can't hurt to be prepared. Cinder didn't run. She scampered up the stairs in a swirl of red silk. Naruto watched her go, shook his head with a bittersweet smile, and moved on to the next item on the agenda. One down. Cinder would fetch Willow, and he'd already donned his suit. Now he just had to corral the rest of his friends and family before someone started swinging. What was taking that damn limousine so long? Told you. Summer's silken laughter echoed through the foyer. For all your complaints, you're a good father. He stole a glance over his shoulder. With one of them, at least. That's it. I've had enough. I'm not going. Not. The wayward warrior pinched the brow of his nose. And there was a second hurdle. He turned to find poor Sienna Khan suddenly sulking near the door, a look of absolute hate etched into her tan visage. For a moment, he almost failed to recognize her. Poor kiddo, she looked like she'd been put through the ringer. Hair had been immaculately coiffed, makeup applied, every eyebrows plucked, and she looked fit to hiss, clad in a heavy dark burgundy gown that left her dark shoulders bare, with stockings and sleeves to match. The young girl looked pretty as a painting. Her outfit suited her quite nicely. Really made her stripes stand out. You know, her ears told another story. She did the heels, which she'd all but kicked off. Oh my! Summer hid a smile behind her hand. She's adorable. When did you pick her up? Nata winced and tried to stay diplomatic. She's a ward of the White Fang. And Silver eyes gleamed with mirth. Another daughter, you mean? Naruto pinched the brow of his nose. Summer, no. Summer, yes. Naruto knew better than to dignify then argue with a response. Summer had claimed Cinder as her niece once ages ago. No doubt she'd attempt to do the same with Sienna. She was welcome to try. Unlike Cinder, she had claws, and she wasn't afraid to use them. If pushed tonight, she'd scratch someone senseless. She caught him and Summer looking and hissed at them, making her displeasure further known to the pair. No amount of bribery or cajoling would bring this kitty down off that tree. Sure enough, Sienna stamped a foot beneath his bemused gaze. I'm not wearing this. Objection noted. Naruto tried not to laugh, grateful for the distraction. We'll go out for seafood later tonight. My treat. Blah! The girl made a face, looking like she just sucked on a lemon. Who do you think I am, Callie? I won't be tempted by some fish dish. Is that so? Summer crouched down and cut her off, bringing herself eye to eye with the irritated fondness. How about steak then? You'll like meaty dishes, don't you? Taken aback by this sudden strangeness, Sienna could only sputter, I mean, sure, I get it. The huntress smiled and patted her head. I hate veggies myself, but doesn't beef sound good? How about venison? Or maybe turkey? Sienna stiffened, all the rage draining out of her like a broken sieve. Her ears perked up and her eyes went slitted. A thin line of drool ran from the corner of her mouth to trickle down the length of her chin. She noticed it at once and furiously scrubbed it away with the back of her fist. But it was too late. The damage was done. Naruto took note of it, and so did Kurama. What did we just witness? He whispered. Summer actually tamed her with food. She'd make a good mother someday. That one. Never thought I'd see it happen. Sienna wilted. Do you mean it? Huh. Maybe bribery worked after all. Course I do. Summer tousled her hair as she stood, favoring her with a paternal smile. A huntress never breaks her word. Anything for my little niece. Wait a second. Sienna blinked rapidly, eyes gone wide. I'm not your niece. We aren't even related. Came the grin. If you're one of his kids, you might as well be. Sienna turned rose red and fled after Cinder. By contrast, Summer looked every bit at her ease, ironic given she'd been forced to wear a gown tonight as well, clad in an off-shoulder slip dress with matching accessories. One never would have known she was huntress. He didn't rightfully know what the fabric was, but it seemed to shimmer silver in the evening lights. It matched her eyes well. If one ignored the scythe bound at her back by a matching cord, even collapsed into its concealed form. Thorn was a wicked-looking thing. You didn't separate a beacon huntress from their weapon. It just wasn't done. What was the same? Every rose had its thorn. Summer must have garnered that idea in naming her weapon, not like anyone else had yet. Summer caught him looking, of course. She was just that sharp. Careful now. She planted one hand on her hip to regard him keenly. Keep staring at my weapon like that and a girl might get ideas. Brat, you just want me for my arm, he scoffed and threw a lazy jab at her head. She ducked him with a giggle and slipped out of reach with surprising dexterity for a woman. Summer Rose might be a bit of a ditz and a spaz when it came to weapons, and frankly far too interested in his right arm. But beneath that veneer, Summer was a good person. She was a good friend, loyal to Willow and honest to a fault. That alone earned his trust. Honestly, he didn't think she had a negative bone in her body. If something ever happened to him, he knew she would be the first to come to his aid. She'd drag the rest of Team Stark along for the ride too. Willow was lucky to have an ally like her. Hey, none of that none of that fatalistic crap. You're not going anywhere. I know, he shot back. Doesn't hurt to be prepared though. And I'm worried about that assassin. Marcus Black had been a constant shadow in his thoughts as of late, a veritable tumor on his mind. If that cheeky prick thought he could strike at Freya while they were away, he was sorely mistaken. He'd find himself a head shorter. Besides, not only had they doubled the shadow clones both within and without her room, but Nicholas himself, a man not even Ospen cared to cross blades with, would be but a single call away. That didn't bother Naruto. Only a lunatic would stick their neck out like this. Anyone who did was asking for it to be hacked off. What truly troubled him was Freya's inability to wake. By all accounts, the Winter Maiden, that term still burned in his mind for reasons he couldn't understand, was fit as a fiddle. She simply wouldn't open her eyes. Marcus must have done something to her. So long as she lived, he would be a threat to her. Just thinking of it made him grinding his hands into angry fists. He'd been caught off guard. That wouldn't happen again. He refused to allow it. Kurma felt it. Don't go blaming yourself. You did your best. Can and am. I should have caught the bastard. And you will next time. Would he? Teleportation was a pain to deal with. Still, it was nothing he'd not seen before. Marcus would know better than to cross him now. He nearly killed him. The assassin would keep his distance, no matter what his allies might say. The onus of guilt lay with him. He'd grown lax since he'd come to Remnant, not weak, but sloppy. Peace was going to ruin him at this rate. He needed to up his training. Willows too, and Cinder. Couldn't forget Sienna either. They needed to be ready for the coming storm. Everything was about to change. He felt it in his bones. We need to be ready, Kurma. And we will be... Naruto! Someone tugged at the sleeves of his suit, yanking him back to reality. Remnant to Naruto. Who are you talking to? Shaking his head, he banished such thoughts and looked back to Summer, startled to find those silver eyes piercing him. She had a death grip on his arm, fingers fisting against the white fabric. He scowled, not at her, of course. Summer was too pure to ever stay angry with. How much of that did you hear? Not much. She gave him a self-same smile. Just the last bit. What's a Kurma? No. The fox stiffened when he honestly considered answer. Don't you dare. That one's terrifyingly enough. She doesn't need to know about me. As entertaining as it might be to reveal Kurma and see him squirm, Naruto decided to abstain for now. It was too risky to tell Summer anything yet. He trusted her well enough, but he wasn't about to spill Shinobi's secrets any more than he already had. Frazzled, he sought to distract her instead. You know, you don't look half bad in that dress. Nice try. Bloodly will get you everywhere. She tossed his compliment in stride with a lazy wave of her hand. Had to take dancing lessons when I was little, so I'm used to wearing dresses. Nothing major. Not a fan of heels, though. Silver eyes glowered at her glass-like slippers. They still suck. She scuffed one against the polished floor. Give me combat boots any day. With that, Naruto finally felt the last of the tension drain away from him. Careful, he chided. Your accent's showing through. She laughed and swatted him on his mechanical arm as she walked past. He didn't feel a thing. All right, now where the devil is, a blood-red blade slammed into the wall mere inches from his ear. Aha! He frowned at his reflection in the dust, watching it chatter. There she is! Which brought them to their third and final hurdle of the evening, quite possibly the most lethal of all. Raven was by far the surliest of everyone assembled tonight. Her thunderous scowl promised pain in his lie in pain if his lips so much as twitched in her direction. He wasn't sure who managed to get her into that black halter dress, but they'd probably paid in blood. She still had Omen's hilt to hand. She still had Omen's hilt to hand, its long sheath secured to her waist by a cord in red belt, ready to draw on him in an instant. As he looked on, she slammed the said hilt into its sheath and drew another dust blade, ready to swing at his face. He really shouldn't say anything, and yet look at look at the little birdie. His thoughts betrayed him regardless. All prim and proper. Aren't you just adorable? She banished Omen menacingly. I will cut out your tongue. Haven't before, and you can't now. His eyes swept down, noting her heels and oddly unsteady posture. Can you even move in those? Red eyes flashed like lightning. Says the man wrapped up in a stupid Schnee suit. Naruto looked down, shrugged. At least I make it work. Unlike you. Is that so? Raven's pale face turned an alarming shade of red. Choose your next words very carefully. They might be your last. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Ha! That's big talk from a bipedal bird. Her forehead smashed up against his. You take that back. Fine, he amended. Bipedal bitch. Happy now? Red eyes met blue. Sparks flew. Naruto didn't dislike Raven these days per se, not as much as he had in the past. The initial ire he'd felt for her was long thawed. Raven wasn't Sasuke. They were similar there, but to be sure. But at the end of the day, she was rougher than his old Fred ever was, and unlike the Shirley Uchiha, the Bronze woman knew how to get a rise out of him. He could do the same to her, of course. Rivalry went both ways. Neither of them liked to back down from a challenge. Raven didn't want to show any form of weakness, and he knew she'd needle him for any such display on his part. Children, both of you, I swear you both, those loose brain cells when you start arguing. Clunk! Someone came up behind them, grabbed them both by the neck of their heads, and smashed their faces together. Foreheads collided, aura flashed, charcoal flared, both stumbled back, seeing stars. Mission accomplished. Any lingering anger they might have felt towards one another pivoted to Summer instead. You do realize we'll get you back for that? Silver eyes met Scarlet and Sapphire dancing with impish mirth. If it keeps the two of you from killing each other, that's fine by me. Raven huffed and tore her gaze away. Not my fault. Should have dragged Crow and Ty along for this. Summer muffled a giggle against her palm. I'm sure they'd look good dressed up. It's not too late. You know, maybe. Yes, it is. No more delays. Naruto slapped a hand to his forehead. For the love of, we're going to be late at this rate. Where in blazes is Willow? Sorry to keep you. A familiar voice called from the staircase. How do I look? He turned towards the stairs. His throat went dry. Willow was lovely. It was the first and only words that came to mind. He couldn't even begin to describe the flowing azure gown she wore, but he gave it a valiant effort regardless. Blue was most certainly her color. There could be no doubt. She'd let her hair down properly this time, abandoning her traditional braid altogether in favor of a more natural look. It reminded him of freshly fallen snow, and that dress. By the sage, it clung to her curves without saying too much, hinting at what lay beneath the shining silk, yet never quite telling. A string of white pearls completed the ensemble, matching the shawl she wore. She descended the steps with poise and in purpose, never once faltering despite the eyes upon her. Cinder trailed half a step behind on her right, while Sienna at the left. The former caught him looking and rolled her eyes. For once, Naruto ignored her. Beautiful, Willow gasped, and he realized too late that he'd spoken aloud. Oh, her mouth formed a perfect oval of surprise before she looked away, and she managed to master herself. Well, you don't look half bad yourself. Naruto supposed he didn't. Well, white certainly wasn't his favorite color by any means, but it matched Willow's outfit quite well, coupled with the still fading color of his hair hardly blonde at all now, and it made clear the Schnees were taking a claim, but fine by him. Really, Willow would claim him all she wanted, and now he felt dirty just for thinking that. All right, everyone out. He took her by the arm, as Cinder did the same, leaving the rest to follow in their wake. We're late as it is. Fashionably late, Willow interjected with a small, satisfying smile. Whatever. He flung up his arms. Outside, now. Their limousine awaited them just beyond the steps without engine running. Naruto felt his lips pursed into a grimace at the sight of it. It was white. Of course it was white. Frankly, it would be a miracle if it wasn't. Ah, there you are, my lady. A man in a black suit stood near the driver's door, utterly unfazed by the bitter evening cold. Bemused red eyes set in a pale yet a handsome face gazed back at them, framed by dark hair and a smile like sin. It didn't know better. If he didn't know any better, he could have thought the man Raven's brother. But no, he wasn't Crow. Some distinct relation, perhaps. Bloodlines were strange like that. Whoever he was, he must have been one hell of a butler to wait in the cold like this. Raven scowled at him for some reason he didn't understand. Willow afforded their guide a rare smile as they appeared. Thank you for waiting, Sebastian. I'm sorry if we kept you over long. Not at all, my lady. The driver sketched a brief, gentle bow. Shall I take you to the venue? That would be the best, yes. She slid in first, and Cinder scooted in after her, claiming the middle seat by right of conquest. Naruto climbed in after her, leaving Summer and the rest to bring up the rear. The interior proved larger than he'd expected, easily big enough to comfortably seat the six of them across from one another, three abreast. Better yet, there was a divider between them and the driver, allowing their group to speak privately. Somehow, he doubted it was for their sanity as much as his. Of course, some people noticed other things first. Shit, they've got wine. Don't mind if I do. Raven, no. Summer slapped her hand down. No drinking. Why not? It's a long drive. Damn it. Naruto settled in to wait. It would be a long night to remember. After all, what could possibly go wrong? Cinder didn't breathe. She saw her doom approaching, and her throat closed at the sight of it in the limousine window. Every second brought it closer still. Each instant threatened to undo her even further. Her heart pounded like a skittish colt in her chest. Under her even further. Her heart pounded in her chest, threatening to burst at any moment. Fight and flight roared within her, threatening to tear her little body apart. In one headbutt to look outside to know why. The glass unicorn. She saw it in the distance, and her world ground to a halt. No, this wasn't happening. She hadn't been told. A small shuddering breath pushed itself through her clenched teeth, and she shrank back, even as the hotel grew steadily larger before her. No. She couldn't do this. All her fears came rushing back, and she nearly bolted. Would have to. Were she not sandwiched between Naruto and Willow? A hand settled on her shoulder. Cinder, what's wrong? She turned wild eyes upon Naruto, fighting panic and suspicion in equal measure. Baffled blue eyes gazed down at her. He wasn't taking her back. No, his confusion was real. They hadn't told her where they were going, but then again, she hadn't told them either. They knew she ran away from somewhere, but not where, not when, not why. Of course, they didn't know, and in her haste to leave her past behind, Naruto came back to haunt her. Why are we going here? The words escaped her in a whisper. This is the venue we booked, Willow explained patiently. Why? Her brow furrowed with concern. Is something wrong? All eyes on her. Cinder knew she had to speak now, lest she lose the moment further. She choked on the word, felt it lodged in her throat. Bitter tears welled up in her golden eyes. Looking away, she pointed a pale finger at the building looming in the distance. I lived here, worked here, before I ran away. They beat me. Her words turned clipped, unable to speak of the true horror that she had endured within those walls. Can we not go in? Papa was the best because he heard the pain in her voice and reacted, pulling her into his arms. Willow was just as quick. Sebastian, stop the car. Credit where it was due. The butler obeyed and the limo slammed to a halt. Summer and Raven shot her a baffled look, but the huntresses held their tongues. Even Tiana felt silent. Naruto nudged her gently, and she leaned into him. Maybe you should tell us the full story, unless you'd rather go home and have him look the fool. If they backed out now, the media would tear him and Willow apart. They'd not care, of course, but the damage would be done. Papa would be seen as weak, cowardly. The blame would lay at her feet for it. No, she needed to face this. I don't have to run away now. And she was brave. She was stronger. She could do this. She had to do this. If she kept running from her problems, she'd never be able to stand on her own feet. And so she told them, slowly at first, haltingly, but she told them all the same. She told them everything, not sparing any details, who she was, where she'd come from, right up to her daring escape. The necklace had hurt so very much had hurt so very badly when she ran away, until she couldn't run anymore. By some miracle, she'd managed to stow away on a ship and make it down to Mantle. She'd been hiding there ever since, until everything changed. Shit, Sienna found her voice first. If that's true, Cinder tentatively showed her the scars on her hands, the burns she'd sustained when she'd ripped the electric necklace off so long ago. Her rival balked. Damn it, they treat you even worse than Afanis, the tiger whispered. At least they didn't shock us down in the camps. She snarled at her. What do you know? That earned her a scowl. Enough to pity you and want revenge. Raven turned her head and spat upon the floor. And people say my tribe is fucked up. Summer slapped her arm. Raven, what? A dark brow arched. There are some lines even we don't cross. Cinder hiccuped once before she could clamp down. Once before she could clamp down on it. Support. She'd not expected it from Sienna or Raven. Papa and Mama, of course. Maybe even Auntie Summer. Everyone looked furious. Said fury drew a blink from her. Revenge. She'd never thought of it. In her life had been a whirlwind of terror and fear and hiding until Naruto found her. Back then, she just wanted to get away. Now, something stirred in her. Heat flared in her palms. They made me feel like nothing. Naruto tucked her into his chest. Screw that, you're not. I know. Her little head bobbed. Because of you, I am everything. He drew her into a fierce embrace. One Willow joined from the other side. Me too. Summer dove on them with an airy giggle that sounded just a little too forced. Cinder stole a glance at the huntress as she swished up against them. Those silver eyes were deadly daggers stabbing not at her, but Naruto. They seemed to come to an accord in that moment, because the blonde nodded. He looked thrice as angry, for his blue eyes had gone red again. They glowed in the faint light. He looked away and began to fiddle with his mechanical arm. Wait, hadn't everyone brought their weapons? An ominous click rose in her ears. Papa? She caught him loading a dust bullet into his arm. He was smiling. It was not a pleasant smile. Why are you loading your arm? No reason. Every reason. Just wanted to make sure the fire mechanism isn't damaged. You never know when I might need to shoot someone. He snapped his false fingers and a blade burst out of his wrist. Oops. His tone didn't convey even an ounce of apology. How silly of me. How did that get there? Naruto, Willow admonished. You can't kill them, no matter how much they deserve it. Cinder wrinkled over, her eyes widened. Willow was filling her rapier with dust. I'm not going to kill them. Cinder turned back and found Naruto's smile was brittle, ready to shatter at the slight provocation. I just want to talk with them loudly, repeatedly, with my fists, and quite possibly Mjolnir. But who's counting? Not like you can kill someone with a hammer. Technically, you can. Well, you can't kill someone with a scythe, Summer chirped, patting the collapsed weapon at her back. Raven didn't even try to play along. So, what will it be? A quick death or a slow one? I'm preferring to the latter, really. Cinder felt the gears of her mind slowly come unstuck and begin to turn anew. This was actually happening. Everyone was openly discussing murder as if it were an everyday occurrence. They'd get away with it too. Naruto and Willow were set to inherit the SDC. Summer had a glorified fast travel system in the form of Raven. If they took it into their heads to kill someone, they'd be a clear continent away before anyone could hope to catch them. Wait, we're really doing this thing? Sienna realized it too, because she sprang upright in her seat, wild glee burning in her amber eyes, and a smile tearing across her face. Bitchin', let me get on this. Naruto laughed, pulled a knife from his sleeve, and offered it to her alongside her whip. I thought you'd never ask. Hide the knife. It all but vanished into her body. She snapped off a salute. Yes, Daddy. Cinder bristled and held tight to his arm. No, he's not yours. He is if he treats me like this. Do behave, girls. Willow was little better, though she spoke against the violence. Her eyes were cold and hard, like a winter storm. No, a blizzard. Even Raven had drawn Omen and surreptitiously started to sharpen her blade with a whetstone she somehow managed to smuggle in. Who knew where she kept it? A pang of realization struck Cinder like the moonlight. They were angry, all of them, not at her, but for her. Sienna looked ready to start a war. Tears burned in her eyes. Why? Why not? Willow pulled her close. You're our child. Didn't it just feel lovely hearing that? And my niece, Summer seconded. If I ever have a daughter, I will not treat her as those witches did you. Ah, that's Raven speak for yeah. Summers flip-flopped a hand. Pretty much means the same thing. Damn straight, Naruto pumped a fist. They mess with one of us, they mess with all of us. Speaking of mess, it would be a shame if that bitch tripped and broke her neck. Raven sneered. Or drowned in the punch bowl. Sienna raised a hand. What if she fell down some stairs? Raven rounded on the girl. Now there's an idea. We can't be blamed if someone has an accident. Willow pinched the brow of her nose. You lot. We can't simply kill these people. All eyes rounded on her. What you pushing out on us, Schnee? Hardly. Death is a mercy. Willow finished, settling her hands on her lap. They deserve no such mercy. Summer clapped softly. There's the Willow I remember. Naruto nodded. Couldn't say it better myself. Well, damn, a low whistle came from Raven. Now there's the kind of spine I like to see. Where were you hiding it all this time? Willow waved a fist in the air. It's right here. Would you like me to feed it to you? Heh, she smiled. We might just get along after all, Schnee. Willow made a face. Gods, I hope not. You make me ill. Now, we're on the same side. Naruto pushed himself between them before they could come to blows and steer the conversation towards more violent waters. A tiny giggle fled from Cinder's lips as the conversation intensified between the five of them. She listened into stoic silence, content to let them plot. All her fears seemed so silly now. Tiny even. She knew why she was afraid. She had good reason to be, but now that dread was replaced by a different feeling altogether. She seized upon it, even if it lifted her spirits and wrapped her in warmth. She had a family. They would protect her, and one day, someday soon, she'd be able to protect them in return. The rest of the ride over was made in comparative silence, broke only by the sound of weapons being sharpened and plots prepared. In the driver's seat, Sebastian hummed a merry tune, only barely muffled by the low divider between them. It sounded like getting away with murder. All too soon, they arrived. The limousine pulled up swiftly, among others, bringing with it the muffled noise of conversation. Cinder's nerves, already frayed, threatened to run away with her. She clamped down on them and sat up straight, just like she'd been taught, checked her hair, and made certain her sheaths and the weapons within were secure beneath her coat. Her hands touched the hilts and took some small comfort from them. If anyone tried anything tonight, she'd be taking hands, assuming they'd even recognize her. She wasn't the urchin she'd been when she fled this place. Keep the engine warm, Sebastian, Willow instructed, just in case. Ask my Lady Wills. The divider rolled down to reveal the eyes of a merry red eye winking at Cinder. Have fun, little Schnee. Try not to get any blood on your dress. Cinder felt the beginnings of a smile pluck at her face. Huh, neat. She'd like this butler. He understood. Willow sputtered and flung a cushion at him, but by then Naruto was already stepping out. His real hand came down, first for her, and then Willow herself, guiding them out of the car. Remember, Naruto dove in for one last hug. If anyone touches you, you'll punch them out. She smiled back. Good girl. Presenting Naruto and Willow Schnee, someone announced, accompanied by their daughter, Cinder Schnee. Cinder let the words wash over her and took strength from them. All eyes fell upon her. It felt like a lifetime since she'd last set foot within these wicked walls. She'd been a mouse, cowering and weak, afraid no more. She lifted her chin and strode into the lion's den. The hotel grounds were resplendent in traditional Atlas colors, almost too much so. Naruto grit his teeth until he felt a molar crack. Too rich, too gaudy, it felt ugly somehow. Maybe that was just his own opinion. He didn't think the inside would be much better. He didn't like the idea of being pressed into a suit to begin with, much less parading around like some piece of meat. Cameras flashed and he tried not to scowl at them even as he ushered Cinder and Sienna out of the car and they were not spared by the media. Damn vultures. Willow seemed to appreciate it even less, judging by her pinched expression. Nevertheless, she stepped up beside him. Shall we? She offered him her arm. Things weren't quite right between them, not by a long shot, but this was a start, an olive branch, and an overture of peace between the two of them. He looped his limb in hers. Not a fan of this? Naruto sought Cinder with his eyes as Raven sauntered away. Sienna shadowed her, with Summer only 2 steps behind. Their daughter looked skittish, but she hid her fear well and kept to her chaperones. She'd come far. Summer would be keeping an eye on her tonight. He didn't even need to ask. He'd seen Raven glance their way with her hand on Omen's hilt. Two, if anyone tried to make a meal out of her past, they were going to eat a knuckle sandwich. Consequences be damned. She's being brave, Willow whispered in his ear. Have some faith. No need to watch her so closely. The father in him remained paranoid, wary, and alert. What if someone tries to snatch her? His partner patted a hand to Sable and flicked a glance at his mechanical arm. We're armed. So is she. Thanks to your training. He caught a hint of maternal pride burning in her words as they warded off another report. And besides, the unicorn is hosting us, not the other way around. These people won't be fools of them. Won't make fools of themselves if they know what's good for them. If they do, here at last, her placid smile gleamed with a hint of steel. I'll see them sued into oblivion. They'll not lay a hand on their head if they know what's good for them. Huh? He grinned. Didn't realize you could be so scary. Yes, well, you're to blame for this. Her elbow hit his ribs. I hadn't planned to be a mother this soon. Take responsibility. Sure. He laughed and waved for the cameras, trying to hide his grimace. Where would you be without me? Not here, she grumbled, guiding him up the steps, probably on the arm of jackets. No, thank you. And something in him slipped. I'm glad. Willow blinked quickly, long lashes fluttering in confusion. Pardon? He's an ass. Naruto growled, all but biting off the last word. Not worthy of you. Maybe it was the anger on his part. Jackets hadn't made a good first impression. Hell, the kingdom itself was rated pretty damn poorly in his eyes already. White Fang riots, attacks in the streets, a stark divide between the rich and the poor, pompous idiots with their heads shoved so far up their rear they couldn't see daylight. Not to mention the torment Cinder had suffered here. Someone needed to take charge. No, someone needed to fix this mess. Then take action, Kerma scoffed. Mentor isn't going to fix itself, you know. Yes, well, Willow's cheeks went rosy and she looked away, distracting him. I'm glad you saved me from him. And she swallowed a hint of pink creeping into her ears. I'm glad we made up. We were being childish, the both of us. I'll not act like that again without good reason. You have my word. The silence stretched on between them like a rubber band, threatening to snap at any given moment. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Willow? She squeaked in surprise when his arm swept around her and held tight. You dolt, what are you doing? Stop pulling a Summer and let me go. Nope. Naruto buried his face in the crook of her neck, uncaring as the cameras flashed and his partner turned scarlet. Oh gods, you're talking like her now. She's contagious. He laughed. Don't care. This felt good. It felt pure. It felt right. Like it was meant to be. He reveled in it and held her close, content to just be himself for a moment. I don't want us to fight anymore, she muttered into her shoulder. Let's talk things out next time. Yeah. Promise? She clutched at him. Neither do I. Still, I'm expected to sing tonight. You can't hold on to me forever. You are? He pulled back. I've never heard you sing before. Didn't know you could. Of course. The Harris granted him a coy smile. Perhaps I'll give you a private concert tonight, if you're good. Now, it was Naruto's turn to choke on his words. Did she just... Well, tonight promised to be a novel experience. Much to his chagrin, the glass unicorn proved itself worthy of his irritation. Not only was it an enormous, luxurious, multi-story hotel that dominated the street, but it was even larger within, hosting a towering 5 floors beyond the lobby. Its ceiling was forged of glass, much like its namesake. The interior walls were an ungodly golden brown in color, and it bore red carpets along the floor. Had that been the end of it, he would have at least ignored the million dignitaries and their entourage. It was not. Sure enough, the hotel's lobby lived up to its name, hosting various glass sculptures of creatures of Grimm, including Ursai, Seaflongus, Sabirs, and Beowulfs. They looked real, almost too real. Someone had gone to great lengths, and likely a great deal of money, to make it so. uncaring for the cost. In another life, he might have thought it beautiful, but now that he knew of the horrors that had transpired here, he couldn't help but find them ugly. He wrinkled his nose at them. Tacky on his arm, Willow huffed in agreement. I agree. It's overdone. A well-dressed woman tried to catch his eye, but he tactfully ignored them. The spike of negativity emanating from her was not so easily dismissed. Envy, greed, wrath. He felt it shift from him to Cinder and knew he had his mark. Despite his best effort to hide it, his scowl deepened. Still, he didn't intervene. He waited a little longer. 2 seconds. 3. Gotcha. This, then, was Lady Tremaine. The madam couldn't be anyone else. When she made a move towards his daughter, Nato glared bloody red daggers at her, killing intent arrowed forth in a vicious targeted burst. Willow felt it. Close to him as she was, she didn't bat an eyelash when this so-called madam toppled like a fallen tree. Oh no, the hairess feigned dismay. It would appear she fainted. Too bad. So sad. Somebody get help, please. And if the woman just so happened to soil herself in abject terror and crack her head on the table as she fell, well, accidents happened all the time. A few voices cried out and helped to rush her away. Naruto steered Willow in the opposite direction, leaving none the wiser. She had spoken truly. Death was a mercy, and wouldn't you know it, he was fresh out at the moment. Tremaine would be dealt with later. Unfortunately, the trouble didn't end there. Excuse me, a smartly dressed man in a military uniform met them only a few steps into the parlor. Might I have a moment of your time? Willow blinked. And you are? James, Captain James Ironwood. The man offered them his hand, and without thinking, Nato clapped it in his own. Osmond told me you might be here. It's a pleasure to see you again. Nato nearly choked on his spit. Osmond, why was he here? Raven and Summer hadn't told him anything about that. Really? Ice blue eyes burned on his shoulder. You know him? The blonde brain's whirled, alarmed to find that he recognized the man standing before them. He seemed familiar, and he remembered having words with him, despite never laying an eye on him. Moreover, his choice of words triggered all sorts of alarms. Again, oh bugger, even longer after he dispelled them, his shadow clones were still coming back to haunt him. It was Sienna all over again. Well, not quite. James didn't look like he wanted to strangle him. Appearances could be deceiving, however. We've met, he muttered. It's a bit of a long story. Well, that settles it. You need to be more careful with your shadow clones. Who knows what the rest did down in Matlum? That said, the soon-to-be general granted him a curious look. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Naruto cast one last fretful gaze Cinder's way. Have some faith, Willow said. All right. She could do this. Be brave. Cinder willed herself to breathe as she drank from the punch bowl. The liquid was red as blood and cool against her throat. It didn't do wonders for her nerves. No. Focus. Breathe in and out. Deep breaths. Calm. She was calm. Nothing could face her. She could do this. When fear tried to rear its ugly head, she burned it to ashes with her anger. Anger was good. Anger gave her focus. She'd take anger over fear any day. She fed it into her semblance and felt the air warm around her. The stifled air kept people away. You're twitching, chill. Well, it kept most people away. Am not, she sulked. Leave me alone. Cinder scoffed into her now empty glass. It was beginning to fracture in her grasp. With a supreme effort of will, she dialed her semblance back and reached for another. No can do. Sienna battered her hand down. Gotta keep an eye on you. She rounded on her with a soft hiss. Why do you care? Dark ears twitched. Because we're alike. We're nothing alike. Damn it all, Sienna. Why couldn't she make sense? The faunus had always been a bitch to her. Until the conversation, Cinder wasn't sure what to think of the tigress now. What did they have? An understanding, rivalry, partnership, whatever this was. She wasn't sharing Naruto. Papa was Papa, Mama was Mama. She couldn't have them, and yet Sienna dared to call him Daddy. Cinder was determined to hate her for that, if nothing else. She wanted to hate her. She needed to hate her. If not, she'd go mad. Sienna took the cup from her hand and set it by the bowl. Cinder couldn't hate her for that. Look. When she stepped between her and a third glass, Cinder almost reconsidered. You're pissed. I get that. You're gonna crack at this rate. Hear me out. You're looking for those 3 bitches. Yeah. Cinder begrudged her a reluctant nod. Nothing more? Well, the boss just knocked out the big one. Sienna stabbed a thumb over her shoulder. Thought you should know. Cinder followed it and nearly flinched as a pair of waiters carried a stunned woman past them. It was her, older, more wrinkled, and smelling faintly of urine, but nonetheless, there was an ugly purple welt upon her forehead, suggesting she'd suffer a nasty fall. Pity she was still breathing. She caught Naruto's eye across the room as they helped carry Lady Tremaine away. He looked past someone across the room. He looked past someone, a man with in a military uniform, and favored her with a sly wink. A warm flush roared through her veins. Ha! Victory! One down. Maybe he was setting a bad example for her. Right now, she didn't care. With renewed scrutiny, she rounded on Sienna. Just what are you suggesting? Targeted aggression. The fauness granted her a grim grin. Find the bitches who hurt you and hurt them back, like your old man did. Just like that. Cinder frowned and touched a finger to her chin. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. There we go. Sienna's grin turned vicious. Now you're thinking like a fauness. A hand was offered. Cinder clasped it. An alliance was formed. Just in time, too. Well, if it isn't Cinder. She knew that voice. No, voices. They'd found them first. A surprise, but not an unwelcomed one. Turning on one heel, she was mildly surprised to find herself looking down on Lady Tremaine's daughters. What were their names again? Anastasia and Drizella. She'd hit a growth spurt. They had not. Her tormentors looked thinner than she remembered, weaker. They were dark circles under their eyes, suggesting a lack of sleep, or better yet, that they'd actually been forced to work in her absence. It would seem that hard work had disagreed with them. Oh, but it very much agreed with her. Pride spread its wings in her heart, and she let it burn like a phoenix, shearing away the last dregs of fear. Why had she ever been afraid of them? They were so small now, so petty. They wanted to put the fear of God in her, to make her the weak one. More fool's day. There was so much she wanted to say to them, so many ways in which she longed to hurt them. She spent a good 3 seconds considering her options. An eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, evil for evil. They owed her a debt of misery, and she would collect tenfold. Well, one of them, she couldn't remember which, scowled at her. Don't you have something to say to us? And there it was. They overreached themselves. Petty girls grasping at greatness. What did they know of strength? Nothing. She could kill them both with one hand tied behind her back. She wouldn't even need her blades to do it. A single touch to their faces would leave them shrieking in pain. The thought seared through her, and she almost gave in. Almost. In the end, however, she remembered Willow's words. Mama was right. Death was too good for the likes of these. Anastasia and Drizella thought they held her sway over her, and in return, she would take away what little power these girls thought they had. I'm sorry. Cinder Schnee smiled as Willow had taught her, and tilted her head just so, dark hair falling across one golden eye. Have we met? Her rebuke struck the girls like a physical blow. Judging by their faces, it was the right thing to say. Behind her, Sienna loosed a low whistle of her own. Well, hot damn. Somewhere in the background, she heard Naruto laugh. That's my girl. Previews. A drug that boosts semblances. That's not ominous at all. You will give her back to me at once. I'm sorry. Have we met? He caught the slap that followed with his face. Deliberately. Now, that wasn't very nice. Raven tipped a flute of wine to her lips and watched the show. May I have this dance? Naruto sighed. Hello, Jackets. I'd say it's nice to see you again, but we all know that isn't true. The wisely little man snarled. You! That is too good for you. I'll make you suffer. He rolled his eyes. Better men have tried and failed. Ha! But I haven't failed. Stand aside, old man. Honestly, children these days. Nicholas drew his great sword with a small sigh. Come on then. Let me show you why the Schnee name is feared. As he spoke, a dozen glyphs burst into life around him, and an army arrived. End of chapter 10.